Alright everybody, hope you're having a good weekend, out sledging, whatever. I was meant to go sledging yesterday with my girlfriend and our kids and that, but ended up, it was freezing man, stayed in the house. Big Caesar man, what a laugh, the big dog. Took him a walk and it's one of the extendable leads, know how you press the button to stop the dog like kinda running. Um, and he's went round a car and the leash was going right over, passing right over the top of the car bonnet, man, and he nearly dragged me just right over the top of this car in the snow. I was like, holy shit, man, powerful dog. Um, but he's a big softie, do you know what I mean? Great laugh. So I thought I'd come on and do a video about a very well known historical case in Scotland. Now, some of you might have heard about this if you've been in prison or you're a true crime buff, whatever. And actually, it kind of happened, some of it happened right on my doorstep. I mean, right on my doorstep. Um, the Peter Manuel case. He was actually one of the last people to be hanged in Scotland. One of the last people, I think he was like the third last or the second last person to be hanged in Scotland, right? Um, so he's a known serial killer. He was born in the 1920s, I'm sure, in America, but his parents are Scottish. I think they immigrated there to kind of pursue a better life, and it didn't work out, so they returned to the UK. And when I was looking into his background, it's actually a kind of study on the evolution of a serial offender. Um, there was like a lot of crimes for dishonesty, like fraud, breaking and entering, uh, which obviously soon escalated into violence, serious violence. Some sticky tapes, as I'll call it, rhyming slang for a certain charge. Nasty, nasty piece of work. So the play, it was actually, he actually grew up in a small place just near Uddingston called, I think it was Birkenshaw, right? He lived there with his parents and I believe maybe a sibling or two. Um, and I'm sure at a very young age he was sentenced to about 8 or 9 years. Um, and he went to Peterhead prison, which back then was like fucking going to Siberia, the Gulag. Do you know what I mean? Like, and a lot of people who've been interviewed by media have all said like he had an inflated ego. Do you know what I mean? Quite small in stature for what I've read and heard. So maybe it was that kind of wee man syndrome, the Napoleon complex. Do you know what I mean? But he had that kind of self image of he was some sort of kind of hard man or a gangster. But let me tell you, right, somebody who's a hard man, a gangster, doesn't commit the fucking crimes that he ended up committing. Do you know what I mean? You protect people like that. His victims were all not only people who were uninvolved in the criminal world, but like young lassies and all that, kids. Do you know what I mean? Adults as well, but furthest thing for a hard man. Do you know what I mean? So but after he got that sentence that he did in Peterhead, like say it was 8 or 9 years, he was charged with a sticky tape on this lassie, right? And he actually conducted his own defence at Airdrie Sheriff Court and he won the case, right? And I imagine that only served to boost his self-perception, like his own narcissism. This would have fueled it. it would have fueled the fact that he believed he could get away with anything. And it reminds me of a notorious American case. Obviously you probably heard of this guy, Ted Bundy. He conducted his own defence. In the end, the case that he went to death row for, like murdering 3 sorority girls, it's the absolute height of narcissism. Do you know what I mean? Somebody convicted by all that, but at the end of the day, they feel, what have I got to lose now? I've already done all this shit. Do you know what I mean? Just crackpots, man. So when he's got away with that, like, bodies have started turning up all over the place, and the, like, kind of close to where I'm at now, do you know? I remember one of the cases was just like a 5-minute walk from my front door. I'll get into that in a minute. But the first known victim of Peter Manuel was this 17-year-old lassie walking home from like a dance in an area called Blantyre, which is like the next town over for where Cambuslang is, right? As you're heading east. And she was actually from the East Kilbride area, I think. But this is the post-war period we're talking, the kind of mid-50s, maybe 1956. So East Kilbride hadn't really developed then. Obviously now it's massive. And back then it would have just maybe have been a couple of hundred houses, but obviously, just like anywhere that's undeveloped, what happens is it's maybe say 100 houses, and then as the generations pass, the land developers will come in and just building it until it just becomes pretty big. So he's chased her through a golf course in the area of Calderwood, which is like, it's no far for here. And he's obviously assaulted her, and I think he bludgeoned her to death. Like, just unspeakable shit, man. Maniac of a guy, you know what I mean? And I'm sure that the cops actually questioned him about this. And I'm sure that he's been continuing with other crimes as well. He's been breaking into shit and all that kind of stuff, do you know? Because what I've seen for some of his killings as well, he was breaking into homes as the family slept, and he was killing them. And one of them was a family that live in, so it's basically, back then it was called High Burnside, but now it's called Cathkin, right? Like right at the bottom of the Cathkin, in a bungalow. And my auntie, when I was a young boy, I mean really young, right? Maybe 8-year-old or something. My auntie moved from Castlemilk to Cathkin to be closer to my gran. And I remember passing this house where this was a triple murder, a family, right? And my gran telling me about what happened there, because she would have been like in her 20s or something when this happened, and it was quite a well-known notorious case. And that kind of not piqued my interest, but that's why I always remember that. Used to pass this house taking my kid to primary school as well. Just a horrendous case, man. And I'm sure that the father of this family was on a fishing trip, so he wasn't home, and somewhere up in Loch Lomond, right? But the cops have ended up, obviously, right, a murder investigation, especially if it's a wife and say a couple of kids, if the husband survives that attack, he's going to be the first guy the cops look at. That's just standard operating procedure for this type of thing. So it's no that they're accusing you, they're just trying to rule you out, because obviously they have to start in the middle and work out the way. And this is obviously a stranger, what the cops call a stranger murder, the hardest to solve. Any cop will tell you that. Because most murders are solved because there's a connection between the offender and the victim. So whether it be a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a cousin, a dad, an old pal, somebody you've been known to fight with, whatever, they'll solve it, do you know what I mean? But what happened with that case was, because he'd been on a fishing trip, probably kind of piqued their interest, because they're probably like, how were you away yourself, blah blah blah. I think it turned out he might have been having affairs and all that, but anyway, there was two witnesses in that case who said that one said they seen him driving past Loch Lomond that night, and another one saying they seen him on a ferry or something. So obviously the cops have to run their leads down, because it's a triple murder, do you know what I mean? They're just, no stones getting left unturned, and they'll go back and turn it over again, do you know what I mean? And turn it over again till they find what they're looking for. But he ended up getting remanded, right, in Berlin prison. And the guy who killed his family, Peter Manuel, was in Berlin at the same time. And it was said that he couldn't handle this guy getting all this publicity for a fucking crime he committed. So he wrote to the guy's lawyer, who was quite a well-known figure in the legal scene back then. And he's sending him letters saying, I can tell you things nobody knows and all this, do you know what I mean? More narcissism. But what's ended up happening was the guy's eventually been released, because they knew the case was a bit shaky. So that Manuel's ended up continuing with his killing spree, and he killed another 17-year-old lassie somewhere. I believe it was somewhere round about Uddingston, somewhere around there, which is quite close to where he's fae, right? And he buried her in a shallow grave. He also killed a family of three. This is another family, right? No, the first one I've just spoke about. And how was it? I can't mind how the cops eventually caught on to him. But see, the last family that he killed, it was like New Year. I think it might have been about 1955, maybe getting into 56, something like that. And it was said that he stayed in their house for like a week with these bodies in the house, eating their leftover Christmas dinner and feeding the fucking cat. And that tells you that he's comfortable around death, because I've seen a lot of mad shit in my time. I couldn't stay in a house with 3 fucking dead bodies, do you know what I mean? Not even one, do you know what I mean? So it tells you its own fucking story about him, do you know what I mean? About his mentality, about his whole psychological makeup, do you know what I mean? But he stole the family car. Now this is mental, right? It was said that he stole the family car, right? It was called the Smart Family. And when he's been driving the car, he stopped and picked up a fucking cop, like, to give him a lift. And he's brought up these murders, this series of murders, and he's like, I don't think the cops are looking in all the right places. Imagine you'd committed a triple murder, right? And picked up a cop to give him a lift in a car that you've stolen off a family that you've just wiped out. That's just fucking, that's another level of psychopathy to me, because imagine the kick he must have been getting sitting next to a cop who was investigating this stuff, and he's driving a motor of the victims. Now, I don't know how long he'd been, I don't know if this was straight after he'd done it or the day after or whatever, but that's just the height of psychopathy and narcissism, man. Do you know what I mean? And what was also interesting was when the cops went to his parents' house to lift him, to arrest him, search the house, apparently he'd given items stolen for some of the victims. So I don't know if you would want to call them trophies, but we're seeing this in some of the literature as well. I think the Green River Killer used to do shit like this, like he would take things for the victims and like jewellery and give it to co-workers, and would say I'd get a kick out of watching her walking about with that ring on, knowing where it came from. Just sickos, right? He'd actually given, Manuel had actually stolen items and given them his family as Christmas presents, man. And it transpired, right, that his dad had actually alibied him for one of the crimes, one of the murders, right? And burned blood-stained clothing. Now, I don't know if his dad had, maybe he's hit his dad with a story, I was fighting up in the town, because he would hit out with shit like this when somebody would find scratches on his face for where some lap or lassie had scratched him in their dying moments trying to fight back. And he was saying things like, I was fighting up the town with these guys with scars on their faces, which is obviously linked into this kind of image that he's trying to project that he's some sort of fucking gangster, a bit of a ticket, when he was just fucking vermin that would shoot you in the back of the head as you were lying sleeping next to your wife. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing gangster about that, mate. You're just a fucking puke. Just, that's what you are, man, innit? I'm just being open about it, man. And like, you'll get people obviously that might say, well, you can't really say that about him. Well, I'm not saying anybody would say that. I'm saying if you are thinking that, then not really about to get into it, do you know what I mean? I'm not going to change my viewpoint on this type of thing, because this is families we're talking about, do you know what I mean? So I don't know if he's been telling his dad, I was fighting in the town, or his dad knew what he was doing, right? But it's turned out that once he's been arrested, he's just fucking spilt his guts, man, because he couldn't hold it in, do you know what I mean? It's linking a lot of these narcissistic types, they can't wait to fucking tell you how many bodies they've got on them and all that, and he led the coppers to the 17-year-old that he buried in the shallow grave, because the other 17-year-old that he left on the golf course, he just left her there, somebody found her. But the other one, he buried in a shallow grave, and he led the cops to the shallow grave, and I believe that when he led the cops to the body, he was actually standing on Tappy where she was buried, and standing kind of laughing and joking with the police, right? Standing thinking he's just drawing it right out, and they're going, so where is it and all that, and he's going, I can't remember. I think it's around here somewhere, scratching his chin obviously or something, but he was stoning right in TinPail, do you know what I mean? He's obviously getting a thrill out of this, man. Which, as I've said, is obviously tied in with his, his personality disorder. Um, but it's obviously so it went to court in like 1957, and it was like one of the ones back in that time. This would have been like a major trial, like trial of the century shit. Reporters, all this stuff, public galleries packed, courtrooms heaving, do you know what I mean? And he ended up sacking his lawyers, and then cross-examining, he became his own lawyer in this trial as well, and was just hitting it with fucking the most outlandish reasons, trying to explain away how he could have been in these houses and all this shit. But and even the trial judge was meant to have said how he was pretty impressed with his defence, but obviously the fucking jury weren't, do you know what I mean? Because they returned a guilty verdict. I think the first murder, the first 17-year-old that he left in the golf course, I think that case was dropped through whatever lack of evidence, or there was enough reasonable doubt, but it was him that done it. And when he's been found guilty, he's been given the death sentence, because obviously UK had the death sentence by hanging up to, I think it was 66, 65. They abolished it. But he was hung in Villainy prison on, I think it was like 1958 or something. And the funny thing is, the death house, and it was in D Hall, D for Delta, in Villainy, right? But it's all sectioned off now. Like, you can't see it or walk into it. Obviously, the prison staff could have access to it, but none of the cons can go inside it. And I imagine it's a sobering place, man. Do you know? Because you're just sitting in there. It's just a bare cell with a fucking bed in it, and obviously there was no indoor plumbing back then in our jails. We were a bit late catching up with that. And aye, they've just gied him the rope. Best thing for him, you ask me. And I remember seeing something that said, anytime a prisoner was hanged in Berlin, there was always nae talking after it, one of the screws said in a documentary. Because it was kind of like, guy's just lost his life sort of thing, right? But they said, when he was hung, says everybody just kept talking like nothing had happened. Just tells you what they thought of him, do you know what I mean? And it's quite funny, because see, when you're going for a visit in Berlin, right, there's a bit at the back of D Hall, which is right in between D Hall and the outer wall, right, the wall that comes round Berlin car park, and it's like a big bit of, we'll call it disturbed earth, right, that's been dug up. That's where there's about 5 bodies in there, and he's one of them. And I always used to walk by, when I was going for a visit in Berlin, anytime I walked past that, I would look at it and think, how mental is that? There's people lying buried in that. Do you know what I mean? Fucking hell. I'm not sure who the others are, but he's one of them. And funnily enough, I took my son to the police museum in Glasgow Town Centre. It's free, you can go for free. Quite interesting. There's a lot of weird stuff there. And in that museum, they've got the actual copy of Peter Manuel's death certificate, and his fingerprints and his mugshot, and I don't think it's the actual murder weapon, but it's a carbon copy replica the murder weapon, the gun that he used. Um, Amongst other things, like all different uniforms from across the world, cops in fucking North Korea. I don't know how they got that in North Korea, know what I mean? Must have good contacts. But they had all these, like the first radios. They had stuff like linked to. I remember seeing stuff like it was something to do with like IRA stuff, and that they'd try to do something and whatever, and it was all this kind of just weird stuff, and you're just like, holy shit, like, it's just mad to think that you're stoning and looking at all this stuff, like the first truncheons they used, and the first uniforms, like, I'm sure one of them was like, a lot of it looked ceremonial for like back when they first started policing, like big bayonets and all this stuff, but it was interesting, just to kind of like see all that stuff, do you know what I mean? Not really something that I was into growing up as a kid, going to museums and all that, but obviously as you get older you start maturing and your interests kind of develop and expand and all this kind of stuff, so uh, I hope he's like that anyway, like obviously you can look that stuff up about Manuel, especially if you're local, like these things happened like very close by, you know. So that was kind of the interesting thing for me, obviously, to come on and talk about it because it is a part of Scottish criminal history. It's one of the biggest cases that's in memory for the Scottish criminal justice system was that case, you know. Very big case, man. And obviously because of the local links to some of the offences, I thought like, aye, that would be a good thing to come on and talk about. So I hope that you found it watchable, and have a have a good day, and I'll speak to you next time I'm back on. So cheers.